After back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, the Florida Panthers took a major step back last season, missing the playoffs for the first time since 2019, or technically 2020 if you don't count the COVID year qualifying round which they made. So is this the end of the Florida Panthers dynasty? No, absolutely not. They're going to be just fine. Because, as you probably know, the Florida Panthers didn't miss the playoffs this year because they were just plain bad. It was because they were incredibly injured. According to NHL Injury Viz, the Florida Panthers lost the most cap hit to injuries of any team in the NHL in 2025-26, and when you break down which players in particular they lost, it's pretty obvious to see why they were so bad. Obviously, the biggest one was losing their captain Alexander Barkov for the entire season. One of their best players, Matthew Tkachuk, missed 47 games due to a groin injury. Their big acquisition from last year, Brad Marchand, missed over 20 games. Anton Lundell missed almost 20 games. Seth Jones missed 30 games, most of them with an upper body injury, as well as a smattering of other injuries to players. So with all of that in mind, what do we have to do to fix the Florida Panthers in 2025-26? The answer is honestly not much. We'll start as always with the people in charge of making the decisions for this organization, those being GM Bill Zito and head coach Paul Maurice, both of whom are shockingly back after having just won 2 Stanley Cups. And yes, I think it was the right move to not fire those guys just because they had one down season, mainly due to injuries after winning 2 championships. Nothing really more to say there, and when you look at how the Florida Panthers ended their season, the roster they were putting out, it's pretty obvious as to why they were so bad. I mean, in the injury section of this graph, I couldn't even fit everybody. There were guys like Seth Jones, Dmitry Kulikov, and Jeff Petrie, and so many more who were on IR to end the season, which is why the Panthers were trotting out such a pretty absurd lineup. When you insert all of the players who would have ideally been playing all year to the Florida Panthers lineup, you start to realize that, yeah, they're still an incredibly talented team. Obviously, with a top-tier first line of Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Reinhart, a second line that's just as deadly with Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett, with Evan Rodriguez as their other wing. They have Marchand, Lundell, and Eetu Luostarinen as their third line, and between that top 9, you have legitimately 7 guys who would be top sixers on a Stanley Cup contending team, as well as Barkov, who is a number 1 center, and 2 guys who would be number 1 wings on a Stanley Cup contending team in Reinhart and Tkachuk. On the back end is a little bit dicier. Gus Forsling is a number 1 defenseman, and Aaron Ekblad is a legit top 4 guy. But then guys like Niko Mikkola and Seth Jones, not quite as solid on them, but Jones probably a little bit more than Mikkola. And then in goal, you have Sergei Bobrovsky and Daniil Tarasov. Bobrovsky, as bad as he usually is in the regular season, turns it on in the playoffs, and Tarasov's a very capable backup. But what's key for this team is that all those guys that I just highlighted in those key roles are just about all in their primes, from about 27 to 32, the only exceptions being Brad Marchand. Everybody else is right in the thick of the prime of their careers, which is why I'm very confident the Florida Panthers will be right back to being competitive very quickly. Now, in terms of the housekeeping notes, there are a lot of guys that the Florida Panthers are going to have to re-sign, and they don't have a ton of cap space to do so, just about $15 million. The big ones I think that they're going to focus on bringing back are fourth liner Mackie Semeskovich and Bobrovsky, because this is just a terrible goalie class, and Tarasov is not a number 1 goaltender. They do need to figure out a way to get Bobrovsky back, and I think that they will be able to. With where AFP Analytics projects his contract to be, and at his age, I think that they can get him back for a pretty reasonable price, and Tarasov as his backup. Other than that, the only other guy I would really prioritize re-signing is probably Petrie, just because it's never a bad idea to have too much depth on your back end. There's a bunch of depth guys that they can re-sign if they can make it fit under the cap, but the one guy who I think is absolutely not coming back is AJ Greer. He's a guy who's playing 3rd to 4th line minutes for the Panthers. He's probably going to want a decent little raise as per AFP Analytics, and if Florida is smart, they will just let him walk and replace him with any of the other bottom sixers they can bring back, or potentially with one of their young kids, which they do have some prospects, just no good ones. They literally have no player who is rated a top 100 prospect, but they do have guys like Jack Devine and Linus Eriksson who could step up into the bottom 6 minutes. And with a prospect pool this barren and the Florida Panthers somehow lucking into a top 10 pick, I would advise them to just go PPA In the range where the Panthers are going to be picking, there should be some pretty good defensemen, maybe Albert Schmitz or Daxton Rudolph available. You could see Vigo Bjork fall somehow, or a guy like Tynan Lawrence or Ether Belchess could be available. I would, if I'm the Panthers, just take whoever they have highest on their board of those prospects. None of them are particularly standing out as being much, much higher than the others. So yeah, I know that this is a bit of a boring breakdown, but honestly, the Florida Panthers just need to slam a health potion and get back to their form from a couple of years ago, and they should be fine. So long as Sergei Bobrovsky doesn't completely fall off a cliff, so long as they don't get bit by another radioactive injury bug, the Panthers' reign of terror will return in NHL 26-27 Doomsday.